Minutes to allow folks to join. Welcome. Thanks for joining. All right. Thank you all for joining us today. We're so excited that you are here for Blueprint to Impact. It's the first webinar in our three-part series. We'll be having the next installments in April and May. But this session is called From Busy to Built for the Future. So let's go ahead and start with some introductions. And I will kick it off. My name is Jen Chesky. I am a partner here at Education Elements. I am a former elementary and middle school classroom teacher and school leader. I have been on the this side of the house, the ed tech side of the house, in consulting for several years now. And I just joined Education Elements last year, supporting districts in Illinois, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. And I will turn it over to my colleague, Melissa.
Hi, everyone. We're so excited to have you join us for our webinar today. I'm Melissa Prescott, partner at Education Elements. Like Jen, I'm a former educator, classroom teacher, but have also been an administrator. I've worked with students from the pre-K all the way through the university level, and I transitioned into this ed tech and consulting space about 5 years ago, with the last year being here at Education Elements. So again, thank you for joining us in this first part of a three-part series, really towards the Midwest. So thank you again for joining us. Going to turn this back over to you, Jen. We're going to have a little fun, right?
Yes, yes. So Melissa and I are both big foodies. So we thought we'd have some fun with these introductions. We'd love to hear from you. So if you can drop your name, your role, and a famous regional food to you in the chat.
Well, I'm sure you can guess where I'm from. That cheese represents me. So that's Wisconsin. Jen?
Yeah, I could do a couple of things, but let's just say deep dish pizza. I think everyone will get that reference. Kelly has hot dogs in for her. Thanks, Kelly. All right, St. Louis style pizza. That's pretty evident. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you,
Very
Scott.
cool. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and cheesesteak. Awesome.
Little
Philly.
Philly action.
Yes. Okay, great. So let's move on. We'll talk about the objective for our time today and go over a quick agenda. So we know every district has a blueprint, but not every district has the alignment, the systems, and the capacity to bring it to life. So today we will explore what it looks like when those pieces all come together and what becomes possible for students, staff, and communities when they do. So, our agenda, we are going to do a quick check in on alignment. We will do a very brief overview of education elements. We'll go over our blueprint for change, as well as share a relevant Midwest district story, and then talk about application, these tools and things that you can take back to your own district. And then also we'll close and talk about next steps. So we'll move on now to our check in. So just want to first kind of center in why we check in. So at Education Elements, we kick off meetings and sessions like this with a check in question because we want to be very human centered. We want all voices to be heard and represented. So we'll go ahead and move on to our check in question. All right. So if you could please put in the chat, what is one thing you wish your leadership team was better aligned on?
Such a great question, Jen.
Yeah, I would love to see those responses, and it'll help inform our conversation today. And
Well,
Melissa and I were both educators, so we can do the teacher wait time, no problem. We're very well versed in that.
and some as you're thinking through those ideas, some of the things that we hear regularly from our districts are things like teacher recruitment and retention. How do we do this? How do we align values that are happening in curriculum instruction, but also how does that match up with what HR sees happening or the needs from an HR perspective? Or curriculum has one idea, but technology, in order to make those apps and software pieces work appropriately, is everyone aligned? So those are some of the things that we hear for sure. I think we have
I,
something in the chat.
yeah, I love what Kelly threw in the chat about the evolving roles that we'll need in the coming years. We know that that's a real
Mm,
issue with AI and
AI, that's
different
exactly right.
initiatives that are coming down the pike here. Great.
Absolutely.
All right.
Okay, so moving
Oh,
on. Thank you
thanks,
for those.
Scott. Yeah.
Oh, yes, role clarity. Absolutely. That you're absolutely right on that. And like Jen said, with the rise in AI, changing of roles, what that looks like to meet our student need population, so important for bringing that into focus. So let's give a little bit of background on who Education Elements, who we are, what we do. So one thing that's really important about Education Elements is that whenever we show up to partner with a district, we have a national lens. As you can see, we have worked with over 400 districts, 5,700 schools, and over 500 million students across the nation, and some international work as well. But what's really important to us is not only having that national lens, but bringing the local to where the district is at. So whether that means your partner is from an area close to your district, the consultants that we bring to the table are potentially in that region. And so it's really important that we show up ready to work from that local perspective, but also have the national lens to understand those larger trends that we see from across districts in various regions of the US. So that's a little bit about EE. Let's talk about solutions. What do we do at EE? So, moving on, we will see that our solutions include developing strategic direction, developing strategic plans, visions. That's under that first bucket. Then we really work towards growing school and district leaders, and that can look in a variety of ways, whether it's executive coaching. And then we have our deliver exceptional instruction. And so that is where we might provide professional development, walkthroughs, feedback of what we're seeing in the classroom. We also work towards differentiating curriculum materials. That can look like curriculum audits, curriculum implementation, advice on what curriculum we should use next, and then driving measurable school improvement. And that can happen at the local school level, building level, or up to the district level. So I'm going to pause here, knowing that those are some of our solutions. For those of you visiting today, what resonates most with you in this moment? You can drop that in the chat as you have been doing. I know for me personally, I'm like really thinking through a lot of curriculum right now with a partner that we're doing some work with. And I know that that is what is very top of mind for me in the moment is what that looks like, even from their perspective.
Yeah, Melissa, I've heard a lot about school improvement as
Hmm.
well
Hmm.
as strategic direction. Those are several of the conversations that I'm having right now.
Absolutely.
Oh, I love what Sarah mentioned, leadership development as a retention tool.
Ugh,
Definitely.
that comes up several times, Sarah, as Jen and I, it's come up as Jen and I have been going through this webinar and really getting prepared. Is that retention, the recruitment and retention piece, especially in today's world, definitely comes up very often. So I want to point out that we have this little box around develop strategic direction, and that becomes important for our conversation today. So today we're really looking at our methodology, which informs much of what we do all across our solutions. But we're going to focus on that developing strategic direction. But it's really important that we understand what is our blueprint or formula. So, moving on to what that looks like, and keeping in mind that we're thinking through a strategic plan, strategic vision. This is our blueprint. This is our kind of overall encompassing methodology of how we approach multiple challenges that we hear from districts. And so I just want to walk you through some of these phases and steps. First, we want to diagnose deeply. Oftentimes, we'll hear from districts about so many challenges that we're facing, and we need to gather as much data as possible in order to kind of figure out what's going on. So, what's important is what are the challenges, who's at the table, and how are we gathering that information? So, that might come in terms of surveys, focus groups, anecdotal conversations, observations. And so, we gather all of this data and then we move to try to narrow down. So, focus narrowly on what's happening. So, where do we need to focus efforts to get the most and best results with the most impact? Once we've figured out our focus, we really look at building systems that really are measured for effectiveness, impact. And so we create those metrics for success in order to ensure that next piece, which is sustainability and building capacity. So thank you, Sarah, for bringing this up, because what I often think about is a lot of our leaders and teachers are either leaving the field, they need to build capacity. There's so much on their plate. We're thinking about teacher recruitment and retention. So what systems are we putting in place, and how are we measuring impact and effectiveness in order to be sustainable as a district to help this work continue to move on? And I think, Jen, I know in our conversations, you've always been really great about putting something in layman's terms or in a different analogy, different framework. So, can you share with everyone how you see this?
Yeah, so I look at this formula and I think it's really relatable to the work that's already happening in districts across the country and the districts that we work with. It's just broken down to just like the work that we do with students, right? So we diagnose deeply, we gather student data, we identify gaps, and then pull a student support team together. Focusing narrowly, we prioritize what we will work on first, what gaps do we need to address now, and which ones will we address later. Then we build systems. What supports and interventions are we putting in place for the greatest impact and moving the needle? And how will we progress monitor? Sustaining capacity, as you mentioned, Melissa, how are we ensuring stickiness? Looking at our progress and our data, what do we need to pivot on, and how do we create lasting change? Um, so I just like to think about it through that lens. Melissa, do you want to talk about the tools that support this blueprint?
Yes, absolutely. So, moving on, we're thinking about tools and ways to, in that first step of our methodology, is how do we diagnose deeply? So, one of the tools of many here at Education Elements is our data triangle. And this is a comprehensive, multi pronged survey approach for a district and their community. And so, what's really important here is that we're gathering data from students. What are their experiences? How are they engaging in the classroom, in the larger school in general? We want to hear from staff. What are their experiences like? Do we need to maybe increase programs for retention or different supports? What are their insights? What can we gain from that information? And then last but certainly not least is thinking about our families and community and how they serve as partnerships for a district. So with this triangulated data tool, we are able to see these trends over the multiple constituents that we are surveying, and then that might inform some additional focus groups, et cetera, all based on this data triangle piece. And so in our next slide, we're going to see what this looks like in the creation type process. So when we've gathered all of these pieces and data from various constituents, what does that look like in terms of diagnosing the problem? What are the trends that are coming about? Do we need to really focus on what the student experience is? What are we putting in place to solve these issues or challenges that are coming forth through the data? And I think the one really interesting piece about how we at Education Elements use this tool is we not only use it for diagnosing challenges and seeing those trends, but we use this data triangle in terms of progress monitoring, implementation, seeing how things are effective and impactful, so we can use this kind of longitudinal data in order to inform future decisions. So I want to pause here because I'm really curious about those in our webinar. What diagnostic tools are you using at your district or your school building? Are you doing surveys, interviews? What do you use at your district currently? You know, Jen, I find it really interesting while people are putting information in the chat. What I find interesting is that I have talked to school districts who do a lot of surveying using various tools or third parties, but sometimes they get that and they don't know what to do with it, right? I'm sure you've seen that as well. And they're not really sure what to do with the data once they get all of that back. Have you had that as well in your conversations?
Yes, very much so. And also, I would say using a lot of different tools and not being able to triangulate that data and look at it across all of those
Mm-hmm.
constituent groups.
Absolutely. And so that's really helpful. I see we have surveys in the chat. I know that I'm working with a district right now. They're right in the middle of focus groups. And that actually leads us to our next piece, which is we want to share a client story with you. Our partner, Racine Unified School District, is out of Racine, Wisconsin, which is right outside of Milwaukee, if you're unfamiliar with the Wisconsin area. And there at Racine, we've been working with them on and off for about 10 years. And Soren Gajowski, who is the superintendent, was kind enough to share a testimonial since he couldn't make it today. But we wanted folks to see what that looks like. Yes, Jen, they're known for their Kringle. You're absolutely right. That is a far and wide reaching. I remember seeing it even when I was living in Florida, even though I live in Wisconsin now. So that is absolutely what they're known for. Look at us in our foodie ways.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I want us to listen to Soren. It's about a 6-minute video where you get to hear how Soren was able and his team have been able to use our work together to make impacting change at the district.
Hello, I'm Soren Gajewski, Superintendent of the Racine Unified School District in Racine, Wisconsin. Just taking a few minutes to share my experience working with Ed Elements over the years. Formerly, I've been in this role the last 3 years, but before this, I was the Chief Academic Officer here, and a while back, even a principal here. So we've actually worked with Ed Elements for a number of initiatives in the district, going back to maybe 5-10 years ago when we were looking at building a blended learning environment for our students. And so at that time, I was a principal in the district, and we would meet with Ed Elements and then develop a program, sort of a strategic plan, if you will. And we were building that out in our schools, and that was very successful. So as time had gone on and I had embarked on other projects, I've reached out to Ed Elements a number of different times. And most recently for myself, when I got into this role, I contacted them for assistance in developing a new organizational chart, organization around me to support my superintendency. So I was looking to adjust the model that I had lived in for a long time while working through being both in charge, so to speak, but also very familiar with its history and with the people, and to try to depersonalize some of the decision making. I really needed that outside perspective. So I reached out to Ed Elements. We discussed kind of what I was looking for. At the time, we talked a lot about breaking up the district into more specific manageable clusters so that we could provide more school-based assistance and leadership. And so Ed Elements hooked me up with a former superintendent in their amongst their organization. And he then worked very closely with me to talk about different models that either he has experienced or that he has worked with in other school districts, as well as his own years of experience, both as a superintendent himself and then a head of HR in the past. So he provided those models. He then met with the various chiefs here in the district, department leads, talked with them around what their needs are, their perspective, and then came together with me numerous times. We discussed a number of different ideas before ultimately settling on one that I still have today. And so, that long-standing relationships with Ed Elements has sort of build trust. I kind of get an idea of what to expect with them. There's a level of professionalism. They've got a lot of background information, people who have been in the field, people who have had different experiences. And then there's always a lot of good interaction in between. And I'm known to pivot a lot during these processes, and they roll with the punches on that. And Elements has been really good with that over the various projects that I've been involved in. And right now, we've reached out to them to help us take a look at our technology department, our information technology department. Just making sure with all of the changes that are going on in the world of technology, whether it is student devices or even the way we use applications in managing the system here, AI, those things are changing so rapidly. I want to make sure that we're using them the way we should be and what's most efficient and effective, and making sure that we have the talent set and that we're responsive to our customers, which of course is ultimately our teachers and our students. So had a problem on my mind with that and reached out to them because, like I said, we've had so many different experiences I have going back for years and years. So in the end, we would continue to work with Ed Elements because of that trust over time. And we're in the process of doing that work right now with the IT and the deliverables. Over the years, I can see it in our organization, we still utilize the work that's come out of that. So anyway, I'm happy to share that information with anybody who might be interested in working with Ed Elements in the future. And we've been very happy, and we continue to reach out because we found that we still see the remnants of the work we've done in the past, and that says something in a profession or an industry in which lots of things come and go. It says something when that work sticks around. So hopefully that was helpful to you, and I'm always happy to, if anybody has any questions around how our work has been with them over the years, happy to talk about it.
Oh, Melissa, you're muted.
You know, I've been doing this thing for so long and I still forget to take myself off mute. I feel like that's just like the
It
common
happens.
these days. So I really want to hear whether it's folks in the chat dropping their kind of understanding of what they heard, their first impressions. But Jen, talk to me about what you heard. I'm very close to this project and working with the school district and with Soren and his staff. So I want to hear from you how you perceive that.
Yeah, first of all, I'm just like, so thankful to Soren for sending in that video. I know that those folks wanted to be here today and
They
there was
really
a
did.
scheduling conflict. So they were kind enough to send in a video. So we really appreciate that.
Yes, thank you,
Um,
Soren and Emily.
yes,
Shout
yes.
out.
I my takeaways, I really loved how Soren talked about depersonalizing, and you even mentioned it, Melissa, right? Being close to the work, but utilizing an objective outside voice to be able to see a different path. You know, these are things, what we're talking about today are things that folks can apply in their own districts. They can use the tools and kind of the blueprint to apply in their own district, but sometimes having that objective outside voice just allows you to see things in a different light and come up with different solutions that you wouldn't have come up with on your own. So that was a huge takeaway for me. Also, being able to work with a peer who had been in the superintendent role to uncover solutions. That is something about education elements is our team is made up of folks who know this work because they've done this work in various roles as district leaders and school leaders. So I really appreciate that Soren brought that point up. And then I think lastly, he referenced the blueprint with sustained capacity and lasting change with the fact that they are continuing to use these tools today. And Melissa, Racine has been, correct me if I'm wrong, but Racine has been a partner with us for over 10 years. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. It's been a little over 10 years. We're so excited to be able to continue that partnership, strengthen, work in other departments and areas, and just see the work continue to move on. And when you look at what this looks like in practice, I really want to talk about what on our next slide, you can see what this looks like in practice. So, what's really important is thinking about a governance structure. And in fact, this slide is taken straight from something you might see in a proposal or ways that we communicate with our team internally and externally. And so it's really important to see we have our district project team. So these are folks within the district and on the project team itself that oversee and really keep everyone on track. So we're thinking about timing. So not only are we trying to help solve problems, but we also want to make sure that we're doing it in a timely way in order to be responsive to the district needs and community's needs. And so when thinking about that governance structure, that is really important to the work is having someone always keeping things in check, right? And then we have our steering team. And I think, actually, let me slow down and give an example of this. So, a project team for Racine right now, this is work that's happening right now, looking at their technology department. What are the workflows? Are they streamlined? Are there some policies that might need to be reworked, revisited? So on our team is our folks from central office. So thinking about Soren, his chief of staff. Then we have the chief information officer and his right-hand person. So with all of these folks, we sit and we, along with the education elements team, myself as a partner, and then two of our consultants are here to really walk through what are the steps needed in order to uncover, right, those challenges and then figure out how we're going to move forward. With a steering team, these are folks that are really important to the actual content or information itself. And so when thinking about our steering team, they might help advise on the project throughout. They'll provide insight into what's happening in the district or the community at large. They'll review trends from pieces of community engagement and then help draft that strategic vision or plan. So, when thinking about those pillars or whatever is needed for that strategic plan or vision, and then we want to think about the education elements team. We act as those trusted advisors or a guide through each one of the phases, which Jen is going to explain here in a moment. So, we define the purpose, we create and complete key activities that have been decided in this partnership. And then we always will give those outcomes with input from the project team at large. We do facilitate on-site sessions, virtual sessions. We have our project team calls. So there's just this constant, and Soren even talked about how there are these multiple touch points, and we do that throughout a project. This is not a situation where we gather a bunch of data and just run on our own. This is a true partnership that we want to have with a district, whether it's Racine or any of the other districts that we work with across the country. So Jen brought this up, and so did Soren, and I just really want to kind of just push this home is, why would you want to work with a third party, whether it's education elements or in another capacity or context? And what I always think about is, just like I said, I'm really close to the work with Racine, so there might be gaps that I don't always see that you can bring to my attention, Jen, as a peer, because sometimes you need someone to help you with the work who understands it but just isn't as close to it, because oftentimes we need those additional sets of eyes on a challenge. So Jen, I know we're moving on, and I would love to hear what this looks like behind the scenes.
Yeah. Next slide, please. Great. So our approach, these are the phases or steps that we take within a project when the work gets started. The blueprint that we went over earlier is the overarching methodology, and these are the steps to apply it. So we start with this plan and align step. It's all about understanding the current state and getting really aligned and clear about what you're driving towards and co-developing a strategy amongst your team. Next would be the foundations step. So building the baseline understanding, reviewing data, creating shared language and understanding. Moving on into the design step, using the data to determine what shifts need to occur, going through an iterative process to get feedback and adjust as you learn more. And then finally, launching. So creating ownership, roles and responsibilities, determining how you will measure and what it will look like with milestones and indicators. How will you pivot if you're not hitting those goals? And how will you stretch the goals if you are? Finally, how will this work be communicated back to those constituents who helped inform this process in the first place?
Yeah. So thank you for explaining kind of the difference between our blueprints or formula, that overall methodology that we apply to multiple challenges that a district may be facing, whether the strategic plan, whether incorporating AI, whether thinking about teacher recruitment and retention. So once that's done, and so in addition to that community engagement piece, our strategic planning approach includes ongoing communication support. And I think that's what's really important, is just having that shared understanding, shared ways of speaking. And so oftentimes, and Jen and I talk about this a lot because we see it so often, is that strategic plans are created in silos. So you might have technology department handling their piece of the strategic plan, curriculum and instruction is maybe dealing with their piece of the pie, HR is thinking about recruitment and retention, and maybe the community gets left out, right? Because everyone's doing their own little piece. And so what we want is to create, not in silos, but with a shared vision, shared understanding, and then making sure we're not leaving the community or families out of that process. So instead, we work with districts to develop all of these touch points for visibility in the process. And that happens through making sure that we're working towards fidelity, right? So if we have a strategic plan that we've put in place, it's not in a cabinet, we're enacting the strategic plan to fidelity by metrics and understandings across the district, across the board, while also understanding those metrics for success when thinking about, is this work, is this strategic plan effective? How do we know? Well, we're using that data triangle again, right? We're using it to get more feedback from the community, more feedback from the students, more feedback from staff to ensure that what we're doing is effective, therefore leading us to that next piece, which is impact. How do we know we're making an impact? Is that what the students are saying? Are they seeing that improve in the classrooms? Are they engaged? Are families engaged? Do we have community strategic partners who are helping our students maybe learn a different skill, right? Especially in the age of CTE these days. What partnerships do we have with different types of educational pathways post the K-12 environment? So I think that's really important to think about what that looks like, but then what happens if it doesn't work, right? When thinking about that impact and we get results that say, okay, maybe we're not involving the community as much as we think we are, because my results from the data triangle says, no, there's some things that we are not really measuring or thinking through. So let's come back and let's, like you said, Jen, it's that iterative process. What's next in order to pivot to gain the most impact for the district and community? I think moving on, Jenna's going to show us, kind of pull back the curtain and see what this looks like for everyone involved.
Yeah, so kind of going back to the theme of this webinar, right? It's all about alignment. So, how do we keep our teams aligned? It looks like this in practice. So, being able to work from a shared document, again, as I mentioned earlier, creating that shared language with clearly outlined goals, the level of implementation, and how we will get there. So, having clearly defined metrics and measurement along the way. And then as we're progress monitoring the plan, this allows for those pivots along the way. So it helps us to understand what's working, what's not, and where to go from here. Keep it sustainable.
No, I think that's so important. Thank you for kind of walking us through that. I think in our next slide, we're going to kind of put all of these pieces together and see what this looks like. So, when we're thinking about developing strategic direction or strategic plan, there's some really important pieces or concepts that come out of this, which is ensuring that we do have that community engagement. So, how are we keeping our community engaged through those partnerships, inclusion of those different perspectives with our diverse populations across a community? So we want to make sure that we are aligned to their needs, right? So the district is aligned to their needs, and that community members also have buy-in for whatever changes may come through the district and through this strategic plan. We want to have that shared decision making. So that's why with Education Elements, when we partner with districts, we want teams to be aligned. We're constantly checking in, having that feedback loop, and making sure that we're all on the same page, working from the same documents. Then again, clear metrics. How are we measuring success? How are we measuring how effective we are? Essentially, we're doing responsive planning, which then creates responsive execution. So how are we going from what we originally designed and going through this long process? Sometimes it can take 6 to 9 months to develop a strategic plan for a district. So what does that look like? Well, it's that constant feedback loop. We're being responsive in our planning. So then when it comes to actually implementation phase, we're being responsive in that way as well. So I want to pause because I want to spend a little time getting some feedback. When you think about these areas of focus that are on the screen, for those who are attending, just drop in the chat. We really want to hear, we're ready for some conversation, right, Jen? Where are you seeing gaps in your district or organization right now? I'm really curious to see what we have in the chat. We'll give folks a few minutes to get their thoughts out.
Yes. And Melissa, I love how you just simplified all of that responsive planning to responsive execution. I love that phrase, and I'm just gonna keep that kind of in the back of my mind because it's just it ties a bow on all of this content for today.
Yeah, I think it's really important because sometimes we might be even responsive in our planning. I think we as educators are good about that, thinking about differentiating instruction, thinking about differentiation for staff, whether it's PD, training, etc. But sometimes we do that in planning, but not always once the plan has started to be in that implementation phase, right? And so when that happens, are we being responsive with the results that we're getting? Right. And so I just think back to my administrative days when I was really working with some teachers, and, I might have a lot of plans that I've been thinking about, but then when I'm giving coaching sessions, am I being responsive in the way that I'm coaching them up? Right. Thinking about their data, thinking about classroom management, or whatever the case may be. Am I being responsive in the way that I'm executing that coaching conversation with teachers and moving forward in that way? I'm not seeing anything in the chat. We got a bit of a quiet audience today, and that's okay. I really am fine with knowing that you and I understand these things, right, Jen? Can you give an experience where you've had this responsive planning to responsive execution in your own work? Putting
I'm
you on the
trying to.
spot now. So
Yeah, you put me
sorry.
on the spot.
Think about like
I
MTSS, maybe. I know you've
I
done a lot
I
of work
will.
with MTSS.
I would say I want to talk about the question actually. Where
Oh,
are we
yes.
seeing gaps
Mm-hmm,
in
mm-hmm.
districts or organizations as far as across these different areas? I think definitely in conversations that I've had with district leaders, that shared decision making is often a gap because, like you
Mm,
mentioned earlier, just having teams being very siloed. I've experienced that, when I was an educator, just being a part of different teams and not really sure what the vision was
mm-hmm.
across the district or even across our school at the time. Clear metrics has been a gap that I've experienced both as an educator and on this side of the house, having conversations with folks, not knowing what to do with data, getting back
Yes.
benchmark data and not really knowing, oh, do we have cut scores? I'm not, what are the cut scores? Like,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
just a lot of confusion around that. So being able to, like we said, break down those silos with creating those teams, with creating shared language, creating shared documents, and working across to really target in on those goals that we want to meet. How about you,
No,
Melissa? Anything in your experience?
yeah, no, I really appreciate you bringing it back in those gaps. And honestly, many of my experiences mirrors yours. You made me laugh about cut scores because I remember a situation where cut scores were changed at the state level, and how much confusion that caused because no one was really ready for what that looked like. And so there wasn't really that shared vision, and there was gaps in understanding and everything that had to be done in order to get everyone on the same page, because that has a ripple effect when those changes happen. And I think even thinking of budget, right, especially in today's world, where we have more students to create plans for and ensure that education, top quality education, but oftentimes districts don't have the budget, right, to in order to meet the mandates either presented at the state level or the district's level. And thinking there are a lot of gaps between resources that we have versus what we have to do to make it a successful environment for our students. So I really appreciate you bringing that back. I think Sarah has added something here. Jen, can you see that? My chat, I can
Yes.
barely see it. Thank you.
Sarah, thank you. So Sarah mentioned seeing gaps in how the strategic plan makes its way into the classroom. Yes,
Oh, that is
definitely.
such a good point.
Yeah, being unaware of the plan and the expected outcomes, and we hear about that all the time. That sometimes the strategic plan, it looks great on the website. It's
So
like
pretty.
we created this, we did this work, and then it just sort of lives there. There may not be metrics, right, to measure against. It's not like a living, breathing document, which we talked about earlier, where we can go through iterations. on our, based on the progress monitoring that we've done to see if we're hitting those goals. So yeah, thanks, Sarah. Thanks so much for bringing that up.
No, you're so right, Sarah. I think back to my classroom teaching days, and honestly, I was so busy with the day-to-day operations and classroom management and everything that comes from being a classroom teacher. I don't know that I really ever understood, at least in those days of my career, how what I was doing in the classroom, I didn't think about the strategic plan for the district. Was that your experience, Jen, or am I just the weird one here? We never really talked about strategic plans at the classroom level at all.
Same. Yeah,
Same.
I don't,
Okay.
I don't think I ever heard of or heard of about what was in our strategic plan when I was a classroom teacher. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think
yeah.
Sarah, yes. Can you read that last little part of Sarah's?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank
Sarah
you.
said as a classroom teacher, strategic plan was not on my radar.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Same
Thank you for
experience.
thank you for confirming that, Sarah.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure it wasn't just my experience here. And
I
so,
would say too, Melissa, just to add on to that, as a parent,
oh,
I have four grown and flown children, as I like to say. And as a parent, I never had communication that I can recall about a strategic plan or the goals of the district. If
mhm.
I went on the district website, I could see those things, but it wasn't something that was openly communicated and driven home, literally speaking, driven home. So,
Yeah,
yeah, so
so
I
true.
think there's definitely those gaps still exist.
Mhm, mhm.
And yeah, do you want to talk about some examples of that work that we've done, Melissa?
Absolutely. So, on our next slide, you can see some of the work that we have done here at Education Elements. And for those of you who attended today to the webinar, and even those who were unable to attend but registered, you'll get this slide deck. But I do want to point out a few examples that really speak to maybe what's happening here in the Midwest and strategic plans that reflect as such. We have Verona area schools right there in the top middle, that's here in Wisconsin. We have several examples from Indiana, so Northwest Allen County, Michigan City, East Allen County, etc. And then there are some other examples that are from across the nation. And I just think it's really important for folks, if they want to see what this looks like in action, it's really interesting. Something that I see with a few of these examples is that it might have started as a strategic plan, but then the work also included, say, portrait of a graduate student, because that became very important for a district. And so you'll see how the strategic plan has kind of become part of the district as a whole with the work we've done with our partners. Now, Jen, do you want to lead us to what's next?
Yeah, let's wrap and talk about next steps. So, Melissa and I are really excited. As we said, this is one of three parts. We'll be having webinars again in April and May. So, watch your emails for info on those. But we want to follow these webinars with time to get together and actually chat. So instead of typing in the chat, actually having a conversation. Um, and bring your favorite beverage. We're calling it a coffee chat, but we want to just give space and time, less than 60 minutes. We know folks are busy. I know that we're sort of in the midst of spring break schedules, so some people are on break, others are waiting to go next week. But
Testing
we want,
season.
yeah, testing season. We know
Yep.
it's a busy time, but we want to just like be able to carve out this time, less than 60 minutes, with a small group of peers to be able to thought partner. Melissa and I are great thought partners together at work, and we want to just hear what's going on, give you that opportunity to thought partner with other folks in the same roles across the Midwest. We're holding this tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. Central Time. You can go ahead and scan the QR code here. As Melissa mentioned, we'll also be following up with an email to share the resources from today. We'll share a calendar invite in that email as well. But yeah, anything you want to add, Melissa, that I'm missing? I think so. Yeah. Yeah, we're so thankful for everyone. Yeah, we're so thankful for everyone joining us today. And watch for an email. We'll be following up. Thank you.